Today marks the 50th anniversary of Pope Francis' ordination to the priesthood. He is the first Latin American and the first Jesuit pope. The Holy Father celebrated his anniversary at a book launch of spiritual writings from a fellow Argentine Jesuit and spiritual father to Pope Francis. Father John Dardis is General Counselor for Discernment and Apostolic Planning with the General Curia of the Jesuits. He joins us from Rome. Father, welcome into the broadcast. You have met Pope Francis several times, and as a fellow Jesuit, tell us a little about the Holy Father that the public doesn't normally see.
Thank you very much. Well, one time I met him that was very memorable was here in our Jesuit house in Rome, and I wanted to ask him to pray for a friend of mine, a very dear friend of mine, and she was dying of cancer. And I wanted to ask him to pray for her. So I passed him a little note because I felt I wouldn't have much time to explain everything. And I said, could you please pray for this friend of mine? And the way he listened so attentively, the way he looked at me was just so moving that that's one of the memories I have. Another memory I have is when I was in the nunciature in Ireland, in Dublin. During his visit there, he came for the World Meeting of Families. And he, in the nunciature, the same evening, was meeting with the survivors of sexual abuse. And he came into us after that meeting, into a group of Jesuits, and he is so obviously moved by that meeting with the survivors. And just meeting him at that moment, you could feel his warmth, you could feel his vulnerability, you could feel his humanity, you could feel his spirituality.
Sounds like two incredible moments that I'm sure, Father, you'll remember for the rest of your life. What does it mean to the Church to have the first Latin American Pope and the Jesuit Pope?
Well, a Latin American Pope, it comes at a moment of great importance in Latin America. Latin America is a continent with such a rich culture, such a rich church culture. It's in a constant state of flux, you could say, I guess like all the world at the moment. So having somebody who understands those dynamics of a Latin American church is very important indeed. Then as a Jesuit, he's somebody obviously with a great spirituality. The Jesuit, the Ignatian spirituality has given a lot to the church, especially in the area of discernment. Many other religious orders as well. The whole church has this rich tradition of discernment, right going back to the Acts of the Apostles, to the early church, to the early Christians discerning together. And Pope Francis really has enlivened that tradition, and almost every talk that he gives, every homily, he speaks of discernment, of listening to the Holy Spirit. And when you hear him and when you see how he works, for example, in the synods, you can see here's a man who really believes that the church is in the hands of the Holy Spirit, and that his job and that our job as Christians and Catholics is to pay attention to that Spirit, to listen to that Spirit, to be detectives, like detectives of grace in the world. Where is the Spirit at work? What's the Spirit saying to us? Can we tune into the Spirit in our personal lives, in the lives of the church, in our parishes, our schools? He fervently believes that. And that lets him go below, if you like, the politicization of the church, where some people want to say it's conservative or liberal or right-wing or left-wing. He goes below all of that discourse, and because he believes the Holy Spirit is the one who's in charge, and the Holy Spirit is the one who's leading us.
Father John, just to follow up on that, do you think the papacy has changed Pope Francis at all?
I think he's grown into the role so much. I think from the very beginning, he knew he wanted to reach out to people. From the very first moment when he appeared on the balcony of St. Peter's just beside us here, and he said, Buonasera. And then at the end of that, he said, pray for me. He's always asking people to pray for him. I think he's more and more aware of his own vulnerability, his need for prayers, his need for God to support him, his need for Mary to be there beside him. He's aware of all of that because this mission that he's got is so difficult, so complex. The church is so varied. The Holy Spirit is there for us and for him, but he's so aware of his own need for that Spirit and of his own need for the support of us all.
Sounds like a lot of really insightful information there, Father John. We appreciate your coming on to tell us a little bit about your thoughts about Pope Francis. Father John Dardis, General Counselor for Discernment and Apostolic Planning with the General Curia of the Jesuits. Thanks so much.
You're very welcome.